In 2002, we had Mazinkaiser, a continuation come soft reboot of Mazinger Z, at which point was 30 years old. It's now closer to 50 years old, and I feel extremely old now. It was successful enough to get another spin-off in 2003. Go Nagai properties really never go out of style, it would seem. So following up on that, Mazinkaiser SKL, which is properly pronounced Skull, dropped in 2010. What does SKL stand for? Well, stupid and loud are two of them, but I couldn't tell you what the K stands for. Now, it's worth noting that this sort of super robot style action has kind of left vogue in general, as not a lot of real robot or super robot series get made nowadays, and those that are trying to do something that sets them apart from the crowd or just show you a lot of boobs while they're at it. So it's kind of nice that this is a little bit more staid. So the first thing that happens is that we're introduced to the only sensible character in this joint, Lieutenant Tsubasa Yuki. She's on a ship that's being sent to Machine Island's gravity curtain to go and turn off the gravity field that's threatening to destroy the planet. And you thought global warming was bad. This is not the first crew that's sent in, as one of their prior crews included the two pilots of Mazinkaiser, here just known as Kaiser. When their transport vehicle gets shot down first thing, it's up to Yuki to find Megami and Kaido and get them on track to complete the mission. At some point prior to this, these two landed on the island, presumably to go and beat the hell out of everyone. It's pretty much all they're good for. But this is a world that rewards that, so here we are. The three factions currently fighting over the island, which has mecha factories that are constantly producing robots to keep smacking each other with, are the Kiba, the Garen, and the Ira. The Kiba are just Mad Max villains, the Garen are more disciplined warriors, and the Ira are entirely female and mostly just defend their own turf. Also, for the keen-eyed, the Ira are mostly named after cutie honey variants. The Ira are named after a character from God Mazinger, and the only other woman that gets significant screen time is Himiko, who's based on a Violence Jack character. Did I forget to mention that this is a Go Nagai Battle Royale? Because that's what it is. It's kind of a new OC beat up old OC sort of OVA. But at any rate, the anime carries itself like it was written by 2005 era fanfic authors and has action beats to match. If Edgelord could be distilled into a mech anime, it is Mazinkaiser Skull. I wish there was a better way to describe it, but if you thumbed through a book of DeviantArt OCs from this time period, you'd see a bunch of knife-wielding angsty boys and a bunch of leather-clad gunslingers with omega levels of deep dialogue. As you can imagine, I'm not super hep to this particular jive. The focus here seems to be on cool and hot-blooded working together, and it's not really in the service of anything but itself, but then how could it be anything but? Edgy characters like this don't exist for anything but showing off how cool they are, and at this point it's a very tired version of cool. But at any rate, this pair of angsty, knife-wielding, gunslinger pretty boys are the pilots of the most powerful robot ever built, and they are really, really good at bashing bots with it, as they prove for most of the first episode of this OVA series. It's kind of like Poochie playing basketball on a skateboard. But at the same time, it's really fun smash 'em bash 'em sort of stuff. The first one that they take out is the head of the Kiba army, who decides to attack twice in the same day to catch everyone off guard. Mazinkaiser fends them off almost single-handedly because the bots that the Ira bring to the field are kind of flimsy and overly aesthetically pleasing, which means that they get super ultra mega wrecked by the Garen and Kiba robots, which all look like Mazinger Z villains, to the shock of none. Real talk though, this is an hour and a half of fighting happens without much in the way of plot to back it up. Once the Kiba are defeated, the Ira look at Kaiser and think, is this our hero? Really? In that cure is worse than the disease sort of way. But it's also extremely easy to read them as, really? These guys? Anti-hero status aside, if they didn't have designated hero written on them, would you really think they were the heroes? The reason they didn't let this pack of morons sort themselves out, incidentally, is because they're actually fighting too much, and the gravity curtain reactors are going critical from overuse. After shutting the Kiba reactor down, you would think that that would take care of most of the problem, but of course it never works quite that well. Back out to the war they go, and Garen is waiting for the Death Caprice team. Kaido goes to fight Garen face to face, and they end up in a mech duel, because you should fight with your mechs if you have them, damn it. Garen is way better of a pilot with way better mech, and Kaiser gets his face punched in. Magami has a big breakdown right in the middle of the fight, which ranks way up there for worst places to have that happen. Other bad places to have a complete breakdown include atmospheric reentry and midway down the sledding hill. Meanwhile, the Garan forces are smacking around the Ira until the, and I can't believe it's called this, until the Wingle comes in and rallies them. The Wingle, incidentally, looks a lot like Minerva X from Mazinger Angels, and has been modified heavily to resemble Devilman Lady, the primary character of the manga and anime of the same name. The Wingle itself is quite the super robot, but it's obviously not as powerful as Kaiser, but against a bunch of mooks, and especially compared to the Ira mechs, it's just about as close to unstoppable as you can get. That's all well and good, but they still have to turn off Garen's gravity generator, and that mission has yet to be completed. Kaido snaps Magami out of his moment, and they go out for round 2 against Garen, because the alternative is to get their shit kicked in. Out of nowhere, Kiba comes back, half burnt to a crisp, and kills Himeko. This gives Kaiser a chance to retaliate and end up killing off Garen. A massive gravity wave crushes the rest of the forces, which solves that problem, but because Himeko is dead, the location of Iron Kaiser has been revealed, and Kiba takes it. This causes the gravity reactor to go into overload way ahead of schedule. So basically, screaming dipshits cause the world to end. I guess art imitates life sometimes, huh? At any rate, Yuki dumps off her spare parts to help power Kaiser up in the fight against Kiba, while the gravity generator sinks into the ground. Killing 2 birds with 1 stone, Kaiser throws Kiba into it and nukes him with an Inferno Blaster, the first time we see it in the show, and I can think of no better time to use it. The world is saved, yay for our team. Let's all go home. It's interesting to note that when you're doing recaps of shows like these, the necessity to explain details of the plot go right out the window by the time you get to the last episode. Now, in a perfect world, everything set up in the first episode is paid off by the end of the last one, at least in an OVA sense, but that didn't quite go to plan here. The real question that we should be asking ourselves, however, is if that's a problem. The catch here is that a lot of this story does not really merit concern about the characters or their backstory because they're here to serve a single purpose, which is scream and punch. Super robot shows exist primarily to entertain children and teenagers for the most part. And when they make a more modernized series aimed at an older demographic who enjoyed those shows growing up, they fill a void of simplicity that exists due to the rigors of modern life. You don't have to ask big questions when you're watching a super robot show. And for some people, that's very comforting, and for other people, that's very boring. But that means that so long as the ending is viscerally satisfying, the wheres and why-fors are only so important. So does it really matter if Frick and Frack here have a backstory that gets resolved at the end of the day? No, because they ended up punching the bad guy and waving the victory flag. Now, don't get me wrong, it's always nice to have a little bit more to work with, but with these characters, Red Oni, Blue Oni, there to punch people, they did it, yay for our team, job done. This makes the characterization work that they did feel like more of a strange interlude. That's the sort of thing you could have easily done with a mid-battle concussion or something similar. There's only payoff for saving the world. This is an anime with a lot going on and yet very little going on at the same time. This sort of show is hard to really give a critique of because the storyline is a very simple one with very few twists, which ends up railroading itself from point A to point B. That in itself is not a bad thing, because the alternative is, whoops, not only are these characters screaming Neanderthals, but they also suck badly enough to let the world get blown up. How about no? Jeez. We left that shit in the early 90s and never looked back. If you're going to make this sort of straightforward affair, you have to give the proper ending. The biggest problem here is that this is the kind of OVA that doesn't do much more than be AMV fodder. And really, it doesn't aspire to be anything else. It's hard to argue against something that doesn't want to be anything more than what it is. But at the same point, is it better to try something interesting and fail, or just to remain safe but not remarkable? The OVA features excellent exhibitions on how to make varied kinds of mecha mayhem, but while there are masterclasses in it, they only exist in the service of going to the next fight. It's difficult to say much more about it than, it did a thing, was kind of cool, and ended. So I guess the most appropriate thing I can say about Mazinkaiser SKL is to give my final thoughts and call it good. So, here it is. Yeah, it's alright. That being said, this is Professor Otaku, the greatest American anime critic, signing off.